Hello. Welcome to the next in the series of review clips for the Biology 3201 Public Exam Review. In this lesson, we'll be examining another sense organ, this being the human ear. The ear is also an organ of homeostasis. It has receptors, specifically mechanoreceptors, that convert air movement into a series of nerve impulses the brain is able to interpret as sound. It's divided into three separate sections: the outer ear, middle ear, and inner ear. These parts you see in the diagram in front of you. The outer ear consists of the pinna and auditory canal. The middle ear consists of the eardrum and ossicles, whereas the inner ear consists of the cochlea, semicircular canals, auditory nerve, and certainly the eustachian tube. If we look at the outer ear first, which comprises, of course, the pinna and auditory canal. The auditory canal, which leads from the pinna into the middle ear, contains tiny hairs and sweat glands, some which are modified to secrete earwax to protect the ear from foreign particles. The middle ear begins at the tympanic membrane, also known as the eardrum, and it ends at two small openings called the round window and the oval window. Between the tympanic membrane, or eardrum, and the oval window are the three smallest bones in the human body, that being the malleus, or hammer, incus, or anvil, and stapes, or stirrup. These three bones comprise the ossicles. Between the middle ear and the nasopharynx is the auditory tube, or eustachian tube. This tube allows air pressure to equalize, and in elevators and airplanes, yawning can cause the air to move through the eustachian tube, and the ear will pop. So looking at things in isolation, we can see here we have our middle ear, together with the eustachian tube, the eardrum, or tympanic membrane, the hammer, the anvil, and stirrup, the three ossicles. It is attached to, connected to, the oval window, round window, which is immediately behind the stirrup. And we also have the eustachian tube, which allows pressure to equalize in this area. These organs you see here comprise the inner ear, with the cochlea, semicircular canals, and of course the auditory nerve. The inner ear, as previously mentioned, comprises of three sections: cochlea, vestibule, which functions in balance and equilibrium, and semicircular canals, also involved in balance and equilibrium. The inner ear is filled with fluid, whereas the outer and middle ear contain air. So how do we hear? Well, we hear because, firstly, sound waves enter the auditory canal. These are funneled there through the work of the pinna. These sound waves, in turn, cause the tympanic membrane to vibrate. These vibrations pass across the tympanic membrane to the malleus, which in turn cause the incus and subsequently the stapes to move and vibrate. The stapes cause the vibrations past them to the membrane of the oval window, which in turn pass it through that to the fluid within the cochlea. As the cochlea vibrates and the fluid within it, there are three canals: the vestibular, cochlear, and tympanic. The vestibular canal joins the tympanic canal and leads to the round window. The lower wall of the cochlear canal is formed from the basilar membrane. The basilar membrane has tiny hair cells which connect to the tectorial membrane. As the fluid vibrates, hair cells in the cochlear canal combine to form the spiral organ, or the organ of Corti, and they synapse with fibers from the cochlear or auditory nerve, passing signals down through to the brain where it's interpreted as a sound. So what happens in essence is as follows. Sound waves funnel through the pinna, down through the auditory canal. When these sound waves reach the eardrum or tympanic membrane, it sets up a series of vibrations. First to the hammer, to the anvil, and then to the stirrup. The stirrup, as it vibrates, passes vibration into the fluid that comprised the cochlea. If we were to unravel the cochlea, it would become a long organ coiled upon itself. In cross-section, it in essence would look something like this. There are membranes. There's the basilar membrane, and there's a second membrane above. Hair cells contained on the basilar membrane brush against the tectorial membrane. As the basilar membrane vibrates and these hair cells brush against the tectorial membrane, nerve signals are sent out down to the auditory nerve. These signals travel to the brain where the sound waves, the signals are interpreted as sound. Each section of the cochlea responds to different frequencies and sends signals out when they are stimulated. Different frequencies. As with all homeostatic mechanisms, there are times where it doesn't work as appropriately and function as it should. There are a number of ear disorders you should be familiar with. Firstly, nerve deafness is caused by damage to hair cells in the spiral organ. Hearing loss is usually uneven, with some frequencies more affected than others. This is dependent upon which part of the cochlea, which part of the spiral organ is damaged. It usually happens with aging and cannot usually be reversed. Conduction deafness, on the other hand, is caused by damage to the outer or middle ear that affect the transmission of sound waves to the inner ear. It can be improved with hearing aids. The issue is getting the sound waves in, not the interpretation of those sound waves. A number of treatments are available. One of the most common is certainly the use of hearing aids. The conventional ones use a microphone to gather sound and an amplifier to increase that sound. A receiver then transmits the sound to the inner ear, and the volume can be adjusted by the user. There are programmable ones available that have an analog circuit that healthcare professionals can program for an individual's needs. There are automatic volume controls, and sound is processed digitally. Individuals differ in hearing loss at different frequencies, so different frequencies require different amounts of amplification. This can be individually tailored for the individual. Children at times do have issues with inner ear infections, and they may get a fluid buildup behind the eardrum, which causes chronic infections. Oftentimes it affects children as a result of the shallow angle between the tube and middle ear, and proper fluid drainage doesn't occur. The most common solution is to perform a tympanostomy. In other words, putting tubes in the ears. These tubes are stitched into tiny slits in the eardrum to relieve pressure and allow this fluid to drain. It's a relatively simple surgery, rarely having complications, and the tubes are usually pushed out as the eardrum heals, which takes about 6 months to 2 years. Now, that being said, there are ethical issues attached to auditory and visual disorders as well. When a person has surgery, they may be excluded from the deaf community that communicates in sign language. While not directly related to hearing, certainly for donors for corneal transplants, there are a few donor corneas available for transplant. Should there be mandatory donation? These are questions that need to be asked. From past public examinations, a number of questions have arisen, some of which you'll see here. The first of these, which sequence describes the path for the conversion of sound waves to nerve impulses? In other words, it is asking you the pathway that is followed. The first one, nerve, cochlea, eardrum, and ossicles, is incorrect. Remember, sound begins at the pinna and works its way in. The second, cochlea, auditory nerve, ossicles, eardrum. Again, that will be incorrect. The third one here, ossicles, eardrum, ossicles, cochlea, auditory nerve, is correct. The pathway begins with the eardrum, which in turn causes the ossicles to vibrate, which in turn causes the cochlea to vibrate, which then is passed to the auditory nerve. So the correct answer is indeed C. The second one, a constructive response question from a past public exam. It asks, some cell phones have ringtones of high frequency that can be heard by adolescents and not by older adults. You're asked to explain two biological reasons for this difference. And a supplementary question to this is, most newer cell phones can be used as personal listening devices. Explain why the use of personal listening devices played at high volumes for prolonged periods should be discouraged in adolescents. The expectation for the markers for this year's question will be as follows. Firstly, for part 1, damage occurring to the cilia of the cochlea due to exposure to sound over many years. Thus, various frequencies are not picked up, causing nerve deafness in the older adult. Damage occurring to the ossicles or eardrum due to aging over time, which doesn't allow sound to get affected to cochlea, causing conduction deafness. The marking scheme would have provided a 0.5% for damage to the cilia, another 0.5% for saying that the frequencies weren't being picked up, a 0.5% for damage to the eardrum ossicles, and a further 0.5% for stating that the physical vibrations were not transmitted as well to the cochlea. Part 2, which asks about personal listening devices in adolescents, the answer will be as follows. Loud music from personal listening devices damages the cilia and the cochlea, or damage is done to the eardrum, causing loss of hearing, conduction, or nerve deafness. The marking for this scheme will award a 0.5% for cause of damage due to loud sounds, name the structure of the ear damaged, and a 0.5% for saying the loud sounds cause hearing problems or deafness. This questionnaire involves interpreting a diagram. You're given 4 parts, A, B, C, and D, and you're asked which structure allows air pressure to equalize. The parts are A, B, C, and D, A being the semicircular canals, B being the auditory nerve, C the cochlea, and D the eustachian tube. Air pressure equalizes as a result of the ability for air pressure to flow through the nasopharynx, through the eustachian tube. The correct answer then is D, the eustachian tube. You're asked, again, similar to a previous question I showed you, what is the order of structures to look through which sound waves travel in the human ear? You're asked, is it auditory canal, then the eardrum, then the ossicles? Auditory canal, ossicles, eardrum, eardrum, auditory canal, ossicles, or eardrum, ossicles, auditory canal? The correct answer is A, auditory canal to eardrum to ossicles. This question posed asks about an imbalance resulting in motion sickness. Your choices are auditory canal, eustachian tube, semicircular canal, or tympanic membrane. The correct answer is semicircular canal, C. Thank you very much for listening to this audio clip. I hope that you found it helpful in your review for the Biology 3201 public exam.